Alright, so I'm often asked about my filtration as well as equipment that I use to run the tank, so I figured I'd do a little overview on um, life support for my aquarium. So we'll start below the tank. I run a pair of sumps. One is actually Refugium. Each one is about 90 gallons. This is the main sump here, and water drains from the tank through a pair of 2-inch pipes, and they drain into these bubble traps here that overflow into 4 7-inch filter socks. They're 200 micron filter socks, which I really like. I've been running them for a number of years. I change them out once a week, but it does a great job of preventing detritus from building up in my sump. Also prevents things like snails and other critters from getting into my sump as well, where they can get into my protein skimmer pump. I've also got about 100 pounds of live rock in there to augment my bacterial bed. Not needed, but it is just, some added bacterial surface. I run a Supermarine 250 protein skimmer made by Royal Exclusive. It's a Bubble King Supermarine 250. Uses an RD3 pump. It's a controllable pump. The pump is presently set to 38 watts, which gives me a real good balance of air, as well as contact time. The skimmer is always very consistent, makes some great foam, and produces some very, very nasty skim mate. I've got an Aqua Driver skim clean self-cleaning head. This is a wiper setup that turns on once a day and runs for 15 seconds. It's controlled by my Apex, and that 15-second run once a day keeps my skimmer nice and clean on the inside, or keeps the neck nice and clean. You'll also notice this little ring around here. That is part of a washdown setup that comes with it. It is plumbed to a water line that goes to a hose spigot in the closet. There's a solenoid valve on that spigot that my Apex controls, and on an as-needed basis, every few months I'll turn it on and it'll flush the collection cup with fresh water, and then I drain into this 1.5 gallon jug here. It's a real convenient setup. I never really have to take my skimmer apart other than cleaning the pump. It keeps my skimmer nice and consistent. I run float switches for my ATO. These are dual float switches. I've got them mounted to this little magnet scrubber here. You can see them down there, but they are redundant. They're connected to my Apex breakout box. I also have another set of float switches, which you really can't see over there. Those are for high and low level alarms. They let me know if my sump level is ever too high or too low. If it's too high, it'll shut off my protein skimmer, send me an alert. If it's too low, it sends me an alert and it'll shut off things like my ATO. I use breakout box up there, kind of hard to see, but that's a custom made breakout box with quick disconnect plugs. Over here we have my Refugium. Again, it's about 90 gallons, and like the sump, I custom designed this. These were designed to fit in as part of a retrofit so they can go in through existing doors. So that is part of the reason why I run a separate Refugium and separate sump. They're very unique, at least the Refugium is very unique in that water will flow in from the other side. It travels through these little 2-inch lines between them. And if you look carefully, you can see that there's slots in there. There's a false wall in here that water will pass through. So water comes in to the Refugium down there, and it'll flow across the back wall here and travel through these slots that run the width of the Refugium, and it'll travel across the entire width of the Refugium in kind of a laminar flow manner. Gives me nice, even spread of the water traveling across the Refugium. And on the back side of the Refugium, I have a similar false wall with slots that the water will pass through and work its way over to the return section over there where the return pump is. In my Refugium, I have a deep sand bed. I've got a couple inches of live Fiji mud in there, and there is also a couple inches of live sand and live rock rubble. I have Chaeto in there. There's also some mangrove in there. As you see, these sumps are covered and Refugium is covered. That helps prevent evaporation. I run a combination of 10 watt and 20 watt 6500K LED floodlights. That works very, very well for the different types of macroalgae that I run. I also have a pair of reactors here. One is for carbon, the other one is for GFO. For my pumps, I have my return pumps here. One on the right over there is my return pump, and this is my closed loop. These are RD3 230 watt pumps made by Royal Exclusive. They max out at 230. These are similar to a DC pump, very high flow. They're capable of 5,600 gallons an hour. My return pump right now is set to 150 watts, which is right around 4,000 gallons an hour. My closed loop is running at 110 watts. The closed loop is controlled by my apex, and it'll slow way down at night. Typically runs about 110 watts during the day until my flush cycle kicks in, which we'll get to in a minute. My closed loop line here does pass through a 114 watt aqua ultraviolet UV sterilizer, and then it returns through the bottom of the tank, where it exits the bottom of a tank through a manifold that circles the bottom of my central overflow. And on that manifold, there's holes running around the entire perimeter of it so that water is distributed out underneath the rocks. In doing so, it helps prevent detritus and other stuff from settling. For flow inside the tank, I run a 6105 Tunzi pump, as well as two Tunzi 6205s. Those are high flow power head type of pumps that are also controlled by my apex. I have a whole bunch of different profiles that change throughout the day. Right now they're in a constant pulsing mode that creates a nice little kind of surge. If you look there, you can see the water level going up and down, and that's the result of 3 little Tunzi power heads blasting across the entire length of an 8-foot tank. So they're obviously very, very powerful because they create an incredible surge throughout the tank that, you know, kind of makes the corals and stuff dance in the water. Now, several times a day, those pumps will go into a flush cycle, and what happens is one side of the tank will kick up to full power while the other side shuts off, and then it'll switch sides. The other side will kick up to full power while this side shuts off, and what that does is it suspends and blasts any detritus up off the bottom and suspends it. At the same time, my closed loop pump will also kick up to a very high flow level, and that'll send anything that's underneath the rocks blasting out from underneath the rocks and help suspend any detritus so that it can be kicked over into the overflow. Now, my return pump exits through a pair of 1-inch sea swirls. I've been running these things for many, many years. These sea swirls oscillate back and forth, and they help, you know, create a great deal of surface agitation, and it switches it up from one side to the next. Like I said, I've been running these things for many, many years. These sea swirls are absolutely bulletproof, and I absolutely love them. So let's see, I think we pretty much covered everything under the tank. We've got the main sump and skimmer, we've got the refugium, we've got the closed loop pump and return pump, the ultraviolet sterilizer. Back there on the wall, you'll see that black bin. Well, that black bin is part of my automatic water change setup, which is a Genesis Renew, and that is a 1-gallon metering bin that, in this case, this one here, is used for wastewater. Water is pumped out of my sump into that, which is controlled by a separate controller, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes when we get outside. So that's underneath the tank. On the outside here, we've got my Apex display, which I don't really mess with much. It's just used as a reference point. You'll also notice on these doors here, I have some fans and ventilation. When the tank's at about 82 degrees, they kick on, and they will help exhaust air from underneath the tank. In the summer, my tank runs a max of about 82 degrees, and in the wintertime, it'll hit right around 76 on the colder days. So, part of my filtration is this display refugium here. Kind of a fan of refugiums because they do help reduce algae and nutrients in a tank. And my whole theory with them is that the refugiums, for me, provide a place where algae can be out-competing algae in the tank. It'll out-compete the tank for nutrients and other stuff, and the end result is, if you look in here, I have absolutely no nuisance algae whatsoever. There is no algae in there other than what grows on the glass, whereas in my refugiums, whether it's the one below the tank or this, I encourage algae to grow. You'll see some halimeda in there, there's some turf algae and some other stuff in there. As long as it stays out of the main display, I'm quite happy. I've got a mangrove in there that's more for effect than anything else. There's also some soft corals in there to help with nutrient export. This particular tank is fed by my return pump. My return pump also feeds the manifold for my GFO reactor and carbon reactor. Now, for lighting over the main tank, I use 8 Kessel 360 WEs. I don't use any supplemental lighting, it's just the Kessels. They're on a motorized light rack. So I'm in this closet here, and you see a button on the wall. If I push this button, the light rack will raise up. You'll notice that the lights are kind of pointed different directions, and there's a reason why I did that. Those are articulating light mounts, and they allow me to point the light wherever I need it. And by aiming them like that, not only do I maximize the spread of the lights and help to keep it off the glass, but it also helps quite a bit in eliminating shadowing. Now you'll also notice there that I have a couple fans hanging. Those fans are controlled by my Apex. Those are just cheap 8-inch fans. And the Apex will turn them on when the tank gets to about 82 degrees and helps with evaporative cooling. It helps to ensure that my tank doesn't get beyond 82 degrees. So I'll do this one more time. Lower the light rack. I keep my kessels at about 8 inches off the water. Up above there, you'll notice a big 10-inch vent. That behind that bowl there is a 10-inch Rotron fan, a 570 cubic inch or CFM fan. It helps exhaust the humidity and heat out from the soffit. That will send the air through that duct there on the outside of the house. I've had that here since I built the tank in back in '97. It's been instrumental in keeping heat and humidity out of there. Once upon a time I ran metal halides. I had a whole lot of pumps, as I was mentioning before, for my closed loop, and I decided that my electric bills were too high. They were actually averaging about $1,100 a month, and I swapped out my sumps. I changed all my pumps and changed my lighting over to LED. I was able to reduce my power bill down to $350 a month. As I mentioned earlier, I have Tunzi 6105s and Tunzi 6205s in the tank, handling flow inside the tank. Now what I've done is I've got these mounted kind of custom. Normally you'd have wires going out of the tank. Well, what I did is I used some of the old closed loop lines. In this case there's a bulkhead on the back wall, and this pump is mounted to PVC, to a custom mount, and the wires are actually run through the PVC. Now if you're familiar with Tunzis, they have a little couple-inch control box on them. I had to desolder that box and resolder it on so that I can route the wires through that pipe where they stick out the back side of the tank here. And this retrofit was actually done while the tank was up and running. So what we did is disconnected the closed loop pumps or shut them down, and I plugged the bulkheads off with thread and fitting so I could make sure the water didn't flow through them. And these lines were actually cut while the tank was up, and we rotated the bulkheads upward so that the stub of the pump or the old plumbing was actually above the water line, and that gave me a place to route my wires through above the water level. And you'll notice over there I have another piece of pipe there that the Tunzi wire comes out of. So it's kind of worked out quite conveniently. I can route my Tunzi cables through the tank and kind of keep sight unseen. Over here, this particular pump is mounted to lock line that was also part of my old closed loop plumbing. And as I said, all these pumps are pushing one direction across the tank. I also have in here a couple Tunzi 6095s, kind of hard to see back there, but they're in there. They're also controlled by my Apex. For this tank I use a max spec razor. I think it's a 1500K light. Kind of gives me a good spectrum for what I'm doing in here. So we kind of covered the inside of the tank here. Let's go outside and talk about the life support outside. So outside I have what I consider my life support shed. And in my shed I've got a lot of equipment that's actually tied to the tank. You can see in here I've got a pair of 100-gallon tanks. One on the left here, that's for my RODI water. The one on the right is my mixing tank for mixed salt water. I keep 100 gallons of each. There's a mixing pump on there that is also tied to my Apex. That mixing pump will turn on every 3 hours and runs for 15 minutes at a time to keep my salt water mixed. I also have a button on the wall over here that I can push. That little button there, if I push that button, it turns my mixing pump on and it'll run for 1 hour, which allows me to transfer water from my holding tank here over to the mixing tank. It also allows me to mix up salt, so I'll dump in salt after I've hit the button and it'll mix it up. This is my automatic water change controller. Again, it's a Genesis Renew. And you'll see another one of those metering bins right there. That's for new salt water. This is a unique automatic water change solution in that you can set this thing from anywhere from 1 to 99 gallons. You could set it for a daily water change, a weekly water change, or continuous. So right now I do 5 gallons a day, and it does it automatically for me. If I want to do 100 gallons a week, I could set it to weekly, and it'll do, rather 99, I can go up to 99, set this for 99, it'll do 99 a week. Or if I want to do a continuous water change, I push the button so it goes to continuous, set the amount, anywhere from 1 to 99, and it will automatically change that out, and it does it in less than 1 gallon every less than 3 minutes. So it's real fast. My Apex is programmed so that the ATO will not turn on until it senses a low water condition for 3 consecutive minutes, which gives the Renew plenty of time to change out a gallon of water. So anyhow, that does 5 gallons a day. Over here, I run a Spectre Pure Max Cap Ultra High Efficiency 90 gallon a day RODI. This particular unit, I'm in Southern California where we're in a drought. This creates 1 gallon of waste for every 1 gallon of RODI, so it's very efficient. You'll see that big peristaltic pump there on the wall. That's my ATO pump. It is a Stenner pump. These things are bulletproof, and I think it can pump water around the block. Now, additionally, I run a GO818 calcium reactor. For CO2, I run a carbon doser made by Aquarium Plants, and it's a little nifty little regulator. You just set the bubble count anywhere from 0.1 per second up to 1 bubble every 10 seconds. In this case, I run 1 bubble every 4 seconds, and it keeps my pH at 6.7. Now, I feed the reactor with a Masterflex peristaltic pump. This is a medical grade pump. I can set the flow rate with the push of a button at 26 milliliters a minute and 1 bubble every 4 seconds of CO2. That keeps my pH at 6.7. My Apex does act as a backup for this particular reactor, but the reality of it is it never intervenes. The combination of a constant CO2 rate coupled with a constant water flow rate through the reactor ensures that my pH is always very consistent, and the only variance I get in my pH within the reactor is the result of the pH drift that I see in my tank from day to night. So maybe 0.1 pH drift from day to night. It's extremely consistent, and I haven't had to mess with my calcium reactor in several months now. The other nice thing about using a peristaltic pump like this to feed it, particularly a variable speed one, is if you want to adjust your pH up or down, all I've got to do to decrease my pH is slow the flow down here, push a button, and I can slow the flow down. If I want to increase the pH, I can push the button here and increase the pH by increasing the flow, or I can just adjust the bubble rate here on the carbon doser. The other nice thing is normally a calcium reactor is controlled with a needle valve where you restrict the flow on the effluent line of the calcium reactor. Often that leads to the effluent lines clogging. By using a pump like the Masterflex, it eliminates effluent line clogs, so my reactor flow is always constant. It never wavers, it never clogs. I also have it set up so that my reactor goes through a secondary media reactor here to help buffer the pH and buffer the effluent before it returns to the tank. Now, speaking of returning to the tank, I have these 1-inch lines, or 1.5-inch lines rather, that run through my wall. They run through the shed, through the house wall, and into a closet next to the aquarium. That is where all the lines are routed. My automatic water change, wastewater actually comes out through here and goes into a drain pipe in here. My calcium reactor lines, they go out to the closet as well. So all that stuff is routed through the wall here. I do have some Apex components out here as well. And as part of my Apex monitoring, I also do water on the floor monitoring, and down here on the floor I have one of my Apex sensors. Forgive the wiring mess in here, but you know, there's a lot of equipment, and it gets kind of hard to manage all the wires. So in a nutshell, that's what's going on in my shed. Take one last trip to the aquarium and see if there's anything else we missed. I know I brought up the Apex a number of times, and it is the heart of my system. Tells me all kinds of stuff. I monitor my pH, my salinity, my ORP. I monitor for water on the floor. It notifies me of high level or low water levels within my sump. It controls my pumps. It controls my lights. If my salinity is ever too high or too low, it lets me know. And a whole mess of other things that I'm probably forgetting. I think, for the most part, I have covered everything in the tank, so we'll just do one quick walk around the tank. Got some SPS's in there, some fishies. Still early in the morning again, so fish are still waking up. there you have it. That is the tour of the equipment for my 500-gallon reef tank. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned.